Keeping It Teal podcast. We are the CCU sports podcast that truly keeps it teal 24/7. I'm your host, Hunter Santiago, and I'm joined today by my two co-hosts, AJ Moran and Jay Largent. Ladies and gentlemen of the Teal Nation, we're coming to you about 2 weeks after the Hawaii Bowl against San Jose State, a 24-14 victory where our Chants brought home the Pineapple Trophy. AJ, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, there's a lot to break down, but I think I could say here that we are all very impressed by our showing on that fine Hawaii Bowl evening. Special teams came up big. There was multiple punts inside the 20 that helps us keep the field position. We had a career long from Kate Hensley. And then there's just a lot defensively, again, a lot of turnovers, right? Keeping the ball in our offense's hands. We like to make things interesting as per always. We made it a lot closer than that game had to be. By penalizing ourselves and doing stuff like that, made it a lot closer. We could have absolutely smoked them. But at the end of the day, I'm happy with the output, and I'm happy to cap off this season with a win. But Jay, what were your thoughts?
Obviously, anytime you win a championship and close out the season with win, that's very good. And to send this team out along with these seniors with a bowl ring and they're forever being trying as Hawaii Bowl champions, that's something also very good. And as you said, we played very well for the first 3 quarters, and we could have laid it on the gas more and made it a lot bigger margin of victory than it was. But a win's a win, and very proud of the team's outcome and to close the season out the right way.
Yeah, I agree with the guys here. The deficit, it was only a 10-point victory. Throughout the game, our defense played really well, right? We kind of held them to, I believe it was like 7 points for a majority of the game, but their offense kicked in the gear in the fourth quarter. And very similar to how the Texas State game was. If you guys remember, they just kicked it into gear in the fourth quarter to try to catch up, but we held on. Really great catches by Sam Pinckney and company to keep us in the game and also get us the W. So it was awesome. It wasn't the most flashy, bowl game that you could watch, but it was fun to watch our Chants go out there and eat. The announcers of the game pointed out that they feel like the younger guys on this team were very hungry to go out there and get a victory. And I truly believe that. I think you could see that. A lot of these guys who didn't get a lot of snaps, as well as a lot of the guys who may have been overshadowed by guys who ended up transferring, they went out there and balled. This team was ready. They wanted to win. And we were playing a San Jose State team that, if you look at the last couple of games they played going into the bowl game, as we talked about in our previous podcast that Jay and AJ covered really well in depth about their season overall, this team had some really great victories in the last 5 games they played by really large margins. So, this was not some cupcake team that we went out and held to 14. This was a very solid bowl game eligible team that we played. So, yeah, overall, I agree with the guys. It was a great dub. I'm so happy that in a 4-year span, we have 2 bowl victories in the 4-year bowl game span. So, yeah, no, it's exciting. Looking forward to going bowling next year and get a third, hopefully, bowl victory that would put us in a winning margin when it comes to our record in bowl games. So excited to see how that goes. Ladies and gentlemen, let's transition over to the Teal Portal segment. If you watched our last 2 podcasts, we talked in depth about the giveth and the taketh of the portal. Today, I'm here to tell you not much has changed here for our Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. We've gotten maybe about 2 new commits since we last talked about 2-3 weeks ago. For the most part, these are guys from D2 or D3 universities. We've just recently, after our bowl games, started giving out more offers to guys like players from Villanova and other FCS teams, as well as Division II teams. Really not anything major when it comes to Group of 5 or Power 5 offers that you can kind of look into. Jay, do you have any news on what's going on in the Teal Portal?
I just know the staff's hitting the trails hard and finding us future OKGs, our kind of guys, to come ball at the beach with us, and they've been giving out a ton of offers, and we just got to bring some of these kids home to join the family.
AJ, do you have any thoughts on what's going on right now with our Coastal Carolina Chanticleers?
Yeah, so, for me, I think this is starting to get into the emergency mode. Obviously, our coaching staff and everything has a lot more. They know a lot more than we do, but For me, I just see all other, not just Power Five, but Group of Five schools, right, getting guys through the portal, making adjustments, making upgrades for their programs. And the fact that it's been kind of silent over there is kind of worrisome. Sometimes part of it was that we chalked it up to maybe they're focusing on the bowl game and right some of these other things going on. Now that that's all said and done, and we still haven't heard anything, um, it's very nerve wracking, because every day that you don't go out and get somebody, they decide to go somewhere else, right? They look at other schools, look at other options. So I think this is one of those times where you have to, you know, maybe hit the panic button a little bit and kick it into gear and really go out there and do what's best by the program and to go get more talent to replace some of the talent you're losing and to just help your program upgrade overall.
Yeah, I completely agree with AJ and Jay on this one. I do believe, like Jay said, that our guys are going out there and they're recruiting their ass off when it comes to just looking for key players to bring to the team. But I also agree with AJ. We're not really going out there and finding talent at levels like the Power Five where we can get a guy that was definitely recruited heavily by a bigger university. So we know that the talent is 100% there and ready to go, or guys who have proven themselves at the Group of Five level who maybe might not be able to get a super great offer at the Power Five level or want to start at the Group of Five level, or coming from like maybe a university that hasn't been to a bowl game during their tenure there. Maybe a guy like, Sam Pinckney came from Georgia State, right? Maybe a guy from another Sun Belt team that isn't looking too hot right now and wants to, play for one of the better Sun Belt teams. Either way, I gotta agree on both sides, and I do think to play middle ground here, I'm happy with seeing that we are extending offers since the portal opened, but I am a little disappointed that we haven't been seeing the kind of names that we saw in the portal last year. I am excited for everyone who has committed and is going to come be a Chanticleer, even if they are D2, D3. They could end up being very phenomenal players and very phenomenal members of the Coastal Carolina community. But as a greedy fan, we want to see some guys that we've seen play, or some guys who, oh, this is a 3 or 4 star from a Power Five team. Is like, yeah, we got this guy. Over other teams, you're looking at guys from other Group of Five, or fans of other Group of Five schools who are like having Christmas. Even before and after Christmas, when it comes to some of these players that they're raking in. Look at Charlotte, for example, in the American Conference. They've reaped in, I want to say, at least 5 to 10 guys from the Power Five level over to their team right now. Why can't we compete with an organization like that, or a program like that? So just things that we've been thinking about to keep in mind. As Jay pointed out to me pre-podcast, we did get a lot of our key players in the month of February last year. So be on the lookout for in the month of February, hopefully us getting some Power Five or Group of Five transfers, but it's definitely looking slightly concerning when it comes to being able to extend offers like that when other Group of Five teams are snatching up players like that left and right. All right, now let's transition over to our early thoughts and predictions segment for the 2024 season. When it comes to the 2024 season for the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers, our non-conference schedule is as follows: a home game versus UVA, Virginia, a home game versus William & Mary, an FCS team from Virginia in Williamsburg, an away game versus Jacksonville State, the team we just played this season from Jacksonville, Alabama, and an away game versus Temple. Our conference schedule obviously will be all of the teams in the East plus 2 teams from the West. So basically, we know for a fact 10 out of the 12 teams that we're going to play next year. So based on that, at the end of this segment, the guys are going to be predicting a couple things, and we'll go over that here in a second. But let's quickly talk about what's going on in our conference. So as we talked about in the State of the Sun Belt segment in the last podcast, JMU lost their coach to Indiana. They lost their quarterback, who has yet to join another program through the portal, and they've lost a significant amount of players. Troy has lost several players, but not a lot of key players. Mostly they are keeping their guys together, as they got a coach from Notre Dame, but they lost their coach to Tulane. Georgia State just lost their star QB to the NFL draft. So that's going to be a big hit on them. If they can't get another guy to come in and ball out like Granger did, then Georgia State may be going downhill a little bit. We'll see. After that bowl victory, as a Georgia State fan, I think those guys would really hope that they would improve, right? But without him, there's a good chance that program goes down a little bit and maybe doesn't make a bowl game next year. Texas State, they had those two quarterbacks, both SEC, I believe, who they had transfer over in the offseason. Both got to take snaps against Coastal. If you watched that game or you were there, one of which ended up putting up most of the points that they had against us in the fourth quarter. That gentleman, Hornsby, he just hit the transfer portal. So it will be interesting to see, like, maybe the level of competition with some of these teams in the Sun Belt may be going down going the next year. I do think Troy will probably still stay consistent with getting a Notre Dame coach and keeping most of their team together, but be on the lookout to see how JMU does without their coach, their quarterback, and a lot of their star players who put a whooping on our Coastal Carolina Chanticleers 2 years in a row. A Georgia State team without their star quarterback, and a Texas State team that only has one of their two QBs that they had last season. Now let's go over to the end of this segment that we discussed, or I brought up to you guys towards the beginning of the segment, which is, what are our predictions for next season? Each of us will be predicting our way too early 2024 regular season record based off of obviously 10 of the 12 games. We will be predicting all 12, but we're just assuming in our minds who the two West teams are going to be, as well as who's the starting quarterback. I mean, as we've talked about in previous podcasts, we don't necessarily know. Vasco now just won the bowl game, which is something that changes maybe our minds from the previous podcast. You have a bowl game winning Vasco. You also have Kim, who just came in from the transfer portal a couple weeks ago from Michigan State. You got Blake Boda, and you got Dante Moore Jr., who just recently committed on National Signing Day. So who's going to be that starting quarterback? And who will be our MVP shot? Who's going to be like the shot that shines above them all? This year, 100% Sam Pinckney. I don't think you can even fight that. Sam Pinckney, from the beginning to this end of the season, was the MVP shot. All right, so who is going to be that guy who stands out for the team next season? We're going to start out with Jay. Who is your MVP shot?
I'm going to go out and say Max Baltazar, the freshman. I mean, every time he got in the game and was running the ball, he was running hard and fast, and I see him getting more confidence, getting more carries, and being a bright star in the running back room. And for the starting QB, I have Hawaii Bowl MVP Ethan Vasco. I mean, as Coach Beck said previously in his Hawaii Bowl press conference, it's Ethan's Vasco job to lose. So I see him beating out Kim in summer, fall, this offseason. And for the regular season record, I have us going back to a bowl game and finishing this season 9-4 with a bowl game victory.
All right. AJ, what do you got with this one? Let's start with, who's your MVP shot?
So for MVP shot, I might be taking a shot in the dark here. I'm gonna go with Simpkins. And here's the reason why. From what I've seen, this kid has shown flashes of really good, like some real talent, and he's looked really, really good. And obviously losing White and Beasley factors into now he's going to take a step up in that depth chart. And I think that he just has been too much of a weapon to where if they use him correctly, not just in the run game, but also he's a weapon in the pass game as well. And I think if they use him the right way, he's going to be one of those guys that's all over the field. He's going to be an absolute problem. So I have him being the MVP shot of the 2024 season.
Alrighty, and who is going to be your starting quarterback for the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers?
I think this one is going to be the question that everybody wants to know the answer to, and I think that it's almost impossible to answer at this given moment. I think Dante Moore Jr. is a really good talent. However, I do think they're going to play the redshirt card with him. I think they're going to have him sit a year, just so he could, watch, practice, the whole thing and get acclimated. And then it gives you three options here. I do believe Boda is a good quarterback, but I have not seen, and we have not seen enough of him for me to say that he's going to be your starter anyway. And I think the other two guys have shown that they can be starters. So I don't know if he's going to be that guy. And then it comes down to basically a coin flip, right? Ethan Vasco has been the guy that's kind of delivered for us this season when called upon, right? Transfer comes in behind Grayson McCall. He knew that. But then, when McCall gets hurt, all these things happen. He even goes to guest first And then when Vasco's time rises, he comes up and he delivers in a big game, and he's found a way to lead this team. When things didn't necessarily go according to the game plan. And from what we've seen, it seems like he's a guy that already knows the system. He knows Tim Beck well, right? He's ready to go. So I think he might be your game one starter. However, it is confusing to me, right, why you get a quarterback from the portal if you don't plan to use him. Obviously Vasco did something similar. So that's what I think is exactly going to happen here. Even though, he comes from Michigan State, Power 5, the whole thing, I think he's not going to be your game one starter. So I'm going to have to go with Ethan Vasco.
All right, AJ, what's your 2024 way too early regular season record?
Yeah, so this one, I'm going to break it down in the math wise. I'm going to go with 8-4. And that was basically this year we went 8-5, both 8-4 because there's one less game on that schedule. And here's the reasoning behind it. I think in the non-conference, right, UVA, I think that can be a loss. I hope that we'd win that game. I think for me, though, after the rough year Virginia had, I believe they go out there and they have a comeback season, whatever, and they won't drop those games they shouldn't. William and Mary, I think we could take care of business at home, right? That's your FCS game. Jacksonville State, I think we actually dropped that game on the road. They gave us a run for our money this year, but I think we actually dropped that game. And then away versus Temple in Philly, I think we could win that one. That's a winnable game. So that would mean 2-2 in non-conference. And then this year in conference we went 5-3. I think the next year we could go 6-2 in conference. I think that's very doable. And then that would put us at 8-4 for your math leads out there. But I think we go 6-2 because the way I'm thinking about it, right, is in your conference schedule. Yeah, every team changes, every team's different, and some of that may work in our favor. And also, just in general, your conference schedule, your conference teams are going to be about the same ballpark of skill level. And I think that now that Tim Beck knows the Fun Belt and everything else, if everybody makes the adjustments needed, I think that they don't drop one of the games they shouldn't have, aka right, Georgia Southern or Georgia State. We probably should have won one of those two games. Obviously James Madison was way out of the picture anyway. Like that one, we weren't winning regardless. But if we win one of those two, right, then we're at 6-2 in conference. Then we probably participate in the conference championship this year, stuff like that. And I think next year that's a very, very doable thing to go 8-4.
Alrighty, gentlemen. Those were some good picks. I'm going to do mine now. So for the MVP, Sean, I'm going with Jamison Tucker. When you look at our wide receiver room, you have Sam Pinckney is heading to the NFL draft, and I can't wait to see where he gets drafted. You got Brown went to the South Carolina Gamecocks. We got in a couple Division II, Division III, and FCS wide receivers. I believe 2 or 3 of them. But I'm not really sure, how many of those guys will start. We got a couple of freshman wide receivers, but there's a good shot most of those guys are getting redshirted. So when you look at like who are the main wide receivers that we're going to have in our starting lineup right now, you have Jamison Tucker, Kyrie Duplessis, and Bryson Graves. And I did see Graves make some really good flashes in the bowl game, but we really didn't see much of him prior. I do think he will be in the starting lineup, but I don't think there's anything to prove that he will be like the MVP shot, the go-to wide receiver. Jamison Tucker has made splash plays all season long. He had a really great play, if you guys remember, in the bowl game. He makes big plays. What does Sam Pinckney do? Make big plays. What did Brown do? Made big plays. I think Duplessis and Graves will step up and have a good season, but I think Tucker has shown us that when he gets targets, he gets catches, and he makes some big catches. So Jamison Tucker is going to be our MVP shot. That's going to help out our starting quarterback next year. With that said, I'm sticking with the guys. I think it's Vasco. And do I think that means he's the best quarterback in the room? I think that's to be determined. But I don't think, even with spring ball, that there's a shot that you don't start Ethan Vasco week 1. I think that more than likely Ethan Vasco is going to go out there. He's going to play well. He's going to continue to develop in the system, and that he's going to start until he gives us a reason why he shouldn't be the starting quarterback. And I think that's going to play into if for whatever reason we end up kind of not playing so great at some point next season. I do believe that we will be in a point where we might shift over to Kim or we might shift over to Boda. But other than that, I'm going to say Ethan Vasco is our starting quarterback, just like the other two gentlemen have. And I'm going to pick our regular season. I think we're going to go 7-6. And I know a lot of people might be like, you're hating. I think we're going to go 7-6 with a bowl win. I do think, the 7th win obviously would be the bowl win, 6-6 in the regular season. It's just when you look at the trajectory of our program of recent, we've gone down about 1 win per season. Do I think Tim Beck is going to be better next year? Absolutely. I think our team will play better next year. I think the major issue right now as to why I think we're going to be 6-6/7-6 next year is mainly because we haven't seen a significant increase in the talent through the portal. Now, somebody could argue, well, we did get a phenomenal freshman class. My concern there is that I think a vast majority of those guys are getting redshirted. So I think we'll see a significant influx in talent in 2025 when all those guys get a chance to be full-time starters. So when you look at like the guys who are more than likely going to be starting next season without getting these group of 5 and power 5 level immediate guys like ready to start, I think we will struggle a bit next season, maybe even more than we have in previous seasons when it comes to guys being able to kind of get the stats and playability that you would want them to have. But yeah, no, I think we're gonna be winning our 3rd bowl game and going 5 years in a row. But I think we may have a really tough stretch, even though our strength of schedule will be, I believe, less hard than this year. What could change my mind? The month of February, the transfer portal. I will say, if stuff does change in February and March via the transfer portal, I could be changing it to the ceiling of 9 or 10 wins. I do believe. I don't think we'll have an undefeated season or a 1-loss season, but I do believe we'd have a shot at a 9 or 10 win season. But I need to see more help coming through the portal with guys who would be immediate starters on this roster. Until then, I'm sticking with a 7-6 bowl game win season. I think we all kind of have similar predictions in the sense that we all believe we're going bowling next year and we all believe we have a shot at winning a bowl game. When we get into the strength of schedule for Coastal Carolina 2025, we have UVA on an away game. We have a home game versus FCS Charleston Southern, Jamie Chadwell's old program prior to us. We have away game against University of South Carolina. This is the second matchup to the original one where we went to South Carolina, I believe it was 2018, 2019. And then we also just added our 4th game for the 2025 season as a package deal as we add ECU, a home game in 2025, as well as an away game in 2028. So this will be really fun. I think you have 2 Power 5 teams we're playing, which is going to be exciting. We get 2 Power 5 matchups. When it comes to Coastal Carolina's 2025 strength of schedule, we have an away game versus UVA, a home game versus Charleston Southern, which is an FCS school that Jamie Chadwell started out with before coming to us and eventually going to Liberty. We also have an away game versus University of South Carolina. This is the second matchup as a deal that we made with U of SC back in the early 2000s, which ended up us playing them in 2018 at their home. They were supposed to come to us, but because of COVID, that got snipped. And then now we're doing the 3rd game in South Carolina again in 2025. We also just added our 4th opponent today with a dual package where we're playing a home game against ECU as our 4th game out of conference in 2025, as well as a 2028 away game where we go to ECU. But yeah, that leaves us in 2025 with 2 Power 5 opponents that we get to play. This is exciting. This year, obviously, we had a Power 5 opponent with UCLA. Now we're going to get, in 2 years, we're going to get that chance to play 2 fairly good Power 5 programs, plus an FCS program that we have some history with our old coach being a former coach of that program, and ECU, a team that we played in a bowl game and they got absolutely destroyed after McCall got hurt. So, we definitely want to get our lick back in 2025 against this program and develop rivalries. In that year, we have 2 South Carolina, 3 Carolina matchups in that year. That's going to be very fun to battle multiple Carolina programs, as well as UVA being Virginia being a state or two over. This is really some fun, close East Coast Southern matchups. When we look at repeat opponents from 2024 to 2030, we have Liberty. We play them in 2027, 2028, 2030. We play UVA, as I mentioned, in 2024, this season coming up, and 2025. We play Army again in 2026 and 2027. We play Temple this season coming up in 2024, as well as 2026. And now, as I mentioned a couple minutes ago, we play ECU in 2025 and 2028. This leaves for Coastal Carolina between 2024 and 2030. In 2026, we have one opening for a team that we can schedule. In 2027, we have two openings. In 2028, we have two. 2029, we have three. In 2030, we have three. These are all very important to know because we want to make sure Coastal Carolina stacks their strength of schedule. Because if you look at Liberty, after them getting absolutely destroyed in their bowl game against Oregon, I think when it comes to the group of 5 teams that might make the 11th or 12th spot in the college football playoffs, they're going to be looking a lot closer to the strength of schedule versus undefeated record. Because if you're undefeated and your strength of schedule is as bad as Liberty's, I doubt at this point after the season that team's getting in. I think they're going to look a lot more heavy into, who did you play? They're probably going to take a 1-loss or 2-loss team that had a way better strength of schedule than they're going to take an undefeated team with such a terrible strength of schedule, which is why it's so exciting in 2025 when we're going to have a very, very solid roster. I believe that we're playing 2 Power 5 teams, both of which could have really good seasons, right? So I personally believe that we should have opponents at least 2 Power 5 or 1 Power 5 and 3 Group of 5, in my personal opinion, opponents to make our strength of schedule one of the strongest, not only in the Sun Belt, but in the Group of 5 level, to get us as many chances as possible from now until 2020 or 2030 to be one of those 12 playoff spots. So with that said, gentlemen, I pose the question to you. What teams should Coastal Carolina schedule in those gaps from 2026 to 2030 to increase our strength of schedule? We're going to start out with Jay. Who are a couple of those teams that you think that we should get deals with and schedule multiple games with to fill out those slots?
Obviously, for the Power 5 schools, I say you obviously got to go with the in-state school, the Clemson Tigers. I mean, if South Carolina's playing us, why can't we play the other in-state Power 5 school, Clemson? I mean, we have a lot of fans, and they have a lot of fans. And I think that would be a well represented game by both schools. And also, I say North Carolina. I mean, they're a state over, but they'd be a very good opponent for us. And then for the G5 schools, I'd say that's to the battle of the colored turfs, the surf turf versus the blue turf. I say Boise State. Let's schedule Boise State. And also the last one just for regional rivalries like we did today, which is a great matchup for both schools. I say we schedule the University of Charlotte. I mean, regional rivalries, that's big nowadays in college football, and I think a lot of fans would be intrigued if we scheduled the Charlotte 49ers for a series. AJ, who you got?
Yeah, so Jay, I do think a lot of your picks are good. I have a lot of also good ones. Ones that are good, but also are kind of reasonable. First, I'm gonna start with an FCS shout out. I know that it doesn't care for strength of schedule, but I'd like to see us throw in maybe like a Furman or like one of these FCS teams that are competing. Not that like Duquesne isn't necessarily in William Mary and competing, but let's throw in somebody that's competing. Cortland, which happens to be sort of my backyard up here in New York, Division III champions. Throw them in or something. Get crazy with it, or some of these FCS schools like that. Maybe South Dakota State, North Dakota State, some fun. But now going on to the Group of 5 level, I'd like to see maybe USF, University of South Florida, somewhat close. And it wouldn't be completely out of our realm to play a team from the American. Maybe reach into Florida, right, with some of these games now that we're playing Jacksonville State. We're scheduling them. We're going to expand into Florida. So I'd like to see us take on them. I'd also like to see, just because Tulane thrown on the schedule, they have been one of the better, if not like one of the best Group of 5 schools recently. Just talking in the past couple of years, they've been pretty good. So to help, prove some points, right? You might as well throw them on there. Big time matchup. And then for Power 5s, I got 2 good ones. Again, I like my Florida school, so I'm gonna go with UCF, University of Central Florida. right? A new Power 5 program. And with that, right, they've maybe been like 500, struggling a little bit. They just got some big time transfer portal guys. And I'd like to see us throw them on the schedule as well, and take them on to show what we could do against Power 5 school. But also another reality Power 5 school is NC State, obviously with Tim Beck's relations there, and obviously Grayson McCall now going to the Pac. I'd like to see us throw them on there maybe a little bit, and continue that rivalry matchup, if you will.
For me, I'm going to start out with Power 5, and then I'm going to go down the group of 5. I'm going to start out with Duke. Duke just had a really good year. They went bowling against Troy, our best Sun Belt team of the last 2 years, and beat them. They're still a pretty good program. Sure, they're losing a couple players and their head coach, but they still won the bowl game without their head coach, right? They had their interim coach, and they're getting a brand new coach. I think Duke is going to continue to be a pretty good program in the ACC. Will they be the best one? No, they weren't this year, but they still, for the longest time before Riley Leonard got hurt, were a really good program. As we're also playing in 2025, we're playing UVA. I'd like to see Virginia Tech, Jay's favorite team, not named Coastal Carolina. I'd like to see a Virginia Tech game. I'd like Coastal to go to Virginia Tech, maybe a 2-game deal or even a 3-game deal, but at least one home game for both teams. And then we're moving to the group of 5 level. My first pick was what Jay mentioned, Charlotte. I'm a guy who resides in the Charlotte area. I was really hoping we were going to get the famous Toastery Bowl, because for this year, it was going to be in Charlotte while they fix up the stadium for where the famous Toastery will be going back to. But yeah, no, I would really like to see that Charlotte matchup, as we've discussed today in our podcast as well as in our previous podcast. Charlotte's been loading up on talent, and they've been loading up on culture. Their coach is formerly from the Michigan staff under Harbaugh, the team that's in the Natty Championship right now. And that's part of the reason why Bro has been getting a lot of good talent, because this team's been absolutely awful. So there's no shot that you can base it off of what their record was this year. Their coach also wears cutoff sleeves like Bill Belichick. They're building a very interesting culture here in Charlotte, and I would love to see us play them. We get the 2 homes in this 3 game deal. They get the 1 home, but I would love to see it. I think it'd be awesome. Also, this has been a year where Coastal has gone to the West Coast. We started on the West Coast, we ended on the West Coast. So the other 2 group of 5 teams I'd like to play are from the Mountain West Conference. Jay pointed out the Battle of the Turfs. I'd like to choose UNLV. This is a team that Blake Boda originally committed to. If Blake Boda ended up being our starting quarterback, it would be fun to see him play against his former team, or the team that he originally committed to. But that's not even just the reason. They had a phenomenal year this year for their program, 6-2 in conference, 9-5 overall. This is a team that usually couldn't win more than 3 games a year. So for them, this was, a resurgence, if you will, for their program. And then my final pick, San Jose State. I mean, they were undefeated in 2020 like we were. A lot of people were joking about how this program and our program should have been the national championship. Yes, I understand if you're a Power 5 fan, you probably didn't think that joke was, something funny. But we at the group of 5 level thought it was funny that, some people were mentioning that on Twitter or X before this game. Also, hey, it was a good game. We beat them by 10, as we discussed earlier, but they're a very good program, and I'd love to see us develop a rivalry with them. Okay. This is a program that AJ, I, and Jay talked about before last pod, about how they've gotten some guys before the bowl game. They were getting some really good guys in the portal. Like, they're developing a pretty damn good culture there. While we beat them 24-14, we didn't whoop their ass. For most of the game, it looked like we did, though. But when it came out of it, we beat them by 10 respectively. I think they would love to get their lick back. I don't think they're going to get their lick back, but I would love to play them, a home where we get to go to the West Coast again. And then, you know what? I'm going to add in one more. I'm just going to add in one more. We won a bowl game in Hawaii. Let's battle Hawaii. Let's get a home and home deal with them too, to add to our strength of schedule. They might not be great. They finished this year 3-5 and 3-5 in conference, 5-8 out of conference. But I would love just to go back to that stadium and get another dub. I don't know. It just feels right to me. To get our guys a chance to go to Hawaii again, Tim Beck a chance to take a shirtless photo with the dance team again. Do it for the culture, do it for the brand. Let's get the Chanticleers back in Hawaii. But these are the teams that we all believe would be a great additions for Coastal Carolina to seek out of conference game deals with. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. I think that each of us brought some really good ideas to the table. And I think we'll be excited to see if any of these actually happen. And if not, like, who are the teams that we do end up scheduling? Overall, though, I really hope we don't end up scheduling 2 FCS teams. I'm tired of playing multiple FCS teams in a season. We need 1 FCS team at most. Ideally, like I said, 3 group of 5, 1 power 5, or 2 power 5, 2 group of 5 would be my ideal world. If we want to increase our strength for the schedule, if we want to get a shot at the college football playoffs as a group of 5 team, that's what we need to do. All right, ladies and gentlemen of the Teal Nation, let's transition over to Keeping Up with the Chants segment, a segment that AJ and Jay use to cover other sports and athletic programs of Coastal Carolina. Jay, AJ, take it away.
Obviously, our men's basketball team, they are 3-9, and they dropped their last contest to Troy, so they're 0-1 in the conference, and they hit the road out of state for the first time this season. They will be at Texas State tomorrow.
Yeah, so for the women here, they are 7-8 overall now after beating Southern Miss tonight, as in Wednesday night when we were filming this. They play Troy on Saturday, and then this makes them 1-1 in the Sun Belt Conference, which is pretty good, pretty okay start. But again, with these both basketballs, as we've been mentioning, it doesn't matter necessarily about the non-conference. The conference doesn't even matter all that much anyway. As long as you get into the tournament, all you need to do is win the tournament, get your way into the dance. But with this men's basketball team, I was joking around saying, imagine if this men's basketball team basically does the bare minimum to find their way into the tournament, the whole thing, and then somehow wins as maybe like a 10-win college basketball team, finds their way into March Madness. That would be kind of cool, but also not so great as a whole. Men's basketball have been struggling. They have been winless after Cliff Ellis has hung it up, has resigned. So again, they really, really, really need to get that program back on schedule. And I'm not saying even about this year. We'll chalk up this year to a rebuild year. But we're just going to keep going over basketball and look towards our next sport that we have been hyping up for weeks and weeks, and we will continue to hype it up as we are now in the new year. Happy New Year, everybody. Baseball game 1 of the season versus George Mason now in 43 days on that timer, on that countdown. Again, final ride with Gilly. Again, make sure you're locked and loaded for that. I don't care if you are the biggest baseball fan in the world. It does not matter. This is the last year with Coach Gary Gilmore, and there's special things to come with this baseball program. So again, even if you're not the biggest baseball fan in the world, let's lock in for this year and go all out, and take care of business.
Thank you, gentlemen, for the update with all our Chanticleer programs. Let's transition over to our final segment of the day, our Pick'ems review. This is kind of going over the majority of our Pick'ems that we have done throughout this season. Obviously, AJ, as mentioned a couple of podcasts ago, won our Sun Belt Conference Championship Pick'ems by picking Troy to win the championship. He was right. AJ has now also won our Sun Belt Bowl game pick'ems, where we picked all 12 Sun Belt bowl games. AJ finished 8-4. Now, he deserves all the props for it. However, Jay and I did tie at 7-5 right behind him. So this was a close one, but AJ pulled out another Sun Belt pick'em victory. We move over to our New Year's Six Bowls, where I came out on top 5-1 with my New Year's Six bowl picks. The only loss that I had was picking Bama over Michigan. And listen, it's not that I thought Michigan was not as good as Bama. I felt like Nick Saban was not going to go in there and get knocked out in the first round of the college football playoff / the semifinal. So, Hey, you know what? Whatever. But I'm glad that, I finally got a victory here because AJ's been crushing it when it comes anything Sunbelt related. So I'm glad I can say when it comes to the college football playoffs, I am the member of the Keeping It Teal podcast to listen to. I spit facts. Also, when it comes to our picks for the college football top four / national championship, the winner will not be announced until after the national championship on our next pod. But when it comes to who had the best top four, I had Michigan at 1 and Washington at 2. And if you've listened to previous podcasts, you know who I have winning the national championship. I have those 2 in the national championship. Those are the 2 in the national championship. But we'll talk a little bit more about who won that one fully when it's all said and done, but it's pretty much locked up there. When you go back to our first couple episodes of the podcast, episode 1 and 3, when we first start talking about who we're picking for our national championship picks, I had Washington and I also believe Michigan in all 3 of the sets of my picks. And I also had them both at least one of them in my top 2 both times. Listen, I see things. I was told I was crazy. Both of these 2 thought I was crazy for having Washington in there and keeping them in there all the way through. I see these things, man. I see these things. All right, Michigan was obviously straightforward. You had to be crazy to think they weren't going to be in the top 4. So I'm not going to glaze myself and say that was crazy. But Washington, bro, you got to listen to me. Next year, when we're doing about midway through our season, our college football top 4, listen to me. Listen to Mr. Hunter Santiago from the Keeping It Teal podcast, because I'm going to tell you who you should bet on next year. Bet on who I bet on, all right? Bet on that winner, because if Washington wins, I'm going to be winning you some money next year. Best believe it. Don't believe Jay if he says horns are up, because like I knew it was going to happen this year. Horns were down, all right? So hey, I'm not going to glaze myself anymore. There's been a whole lot of glazing. This is like Krispy Kreme, a whole lot of glazed donuts here for my New Year's Six Bowl victory, pick'em victory, as well as my top 4 potential victory that we will be announcing on the next pod. All right, gentlemen, anything to mention when it comes to these pick'ems?
I'm just going to say, I got the playoff perfectly correct, just to throw it out there. When we talked about picking the New Year's Six bowl games, I picked the two semifinals correct. Right? I took Michigan over Bama, and I took Washington over Texas. It just so happens I didn't pick basically anything else correct. But it is what it is. There's some unfortunate circumstances. It happens. I got cheesed with the transfer portal and everybody else, people playing, people not playing. It is what it is. But at the end of the day, if Washington wins, we will never, ever, ever hear the end of it. So as much as I did originally want Washington to win at this point, I hope that neither of them win. I hope Michigan wins, but they strip the title because they were cheating and nobody wins the title. And therefore it goes void and Coastal will then regain the trophy. They'll just watch it temporarily or whatever. So that's how the Chants won the national championship.
Yeah. As we talked about in previous pods, or at least 1 or 2 of them, Jay was there the witness in 2019 when I said that I believe Grayson McCall was going to be our starting quarterback in 2020, as well as I thought he was going to be a pretty damn good quarterback. Like I said in that podcast, I didn't know we were going to go undefeated. I did not claim that. I will not claim a lie like that, but I did tell Jay in Sino Grill at Coastal Carolina that Grayson McCall was going to be that guy. I told these guys about week 7, 8 of the season, Michael Penix Jr. is that guy, and they're going to go to the national championship, and he's going to have a shot at the Heisman. He got robbed, but he had a shot at it, so that was true. And he is a shot at being the MVP of the Natty Championship if he can pull out a dub and have another really good game. So hey, I see things. I see things. Just keep that in the back of y'all's mind, Keeping It Teal Nation. All right. And that closes out our 10th episode of the Keeping It Teal podcast. Thank you for listening to our latest episode of the Keeping It Teal podcast. Please like and subscribe on our YouTube, X, Instagram, and Spotify to keep up to date with all things Teal. Until next time, good night, Teal Nation.